The courtroom sat heavy with silence, the kind that wrapped around your chest and made breathing feel like a conscious decision. A young black teenager stood in the defendant's box, hands at his sides, trembling just enough to betray the calm he worked so hard to project. His eyes never lifted from the floor. Just 17. Yet he already looked like someone who had spent a lifetime learning how to make himself smaller. Across the room, a white judge leaned back in his high-backed chair, adjusting his robes with deliberate authority. His gaze was sharp, nearly cutting, and his voice colder than the air conditioning humming above. "You think this is some kind of joke, son?" the judge said, almost spitting the words. The teen didn't answer. His public defender, clearly overworked and flustered, stayed silent too, shifting in discomfort but not speaking up. The judge scanned the courtroom, as if looking for someone to agree with him. "This is why we have crime. No accountability. No discipline. And now you're here expecting mercy." The boy blinked, lips pressed together, but still said nothing. He hadn't said much since the moment officers threw him into the back of the patrol car. Not because he was guilty, but because it never seemed to matter. No one asked. No one listened. He was just another face under a hoodie in the wrong place at the wrong time. Earlier that week, he had been walking home from school. A local store alarm went off. A clerk pointed outside. Security gave chase. He matched the description tall, black, wearing a gray hoodie and sneakers. That was all it took. Now he stood on trial for a robbery he didn't commit. "You were found near the scene just minutes after the incident," the judge continued, flipping through case files with exaggerated annoyance. "No alibi. No statement. Your fingerprints on a bench nearby." The boy looked up briefly, but the judge didn't notice. He wasn't looking at him, was looking at the story he already believed. The courtroom looked bored. Another troubled youth clogging the system. No one cared about his GPA, his spotless record, or that he was on the honor roll. They didn't care that he volunteered at the rec center or helped tutor kids at his church. The judge's gavel hovered. "Before I sentence you, do you have anything to say?" His lawyer leaned in. "You don't have to speak. We'll appeal. Just stay calm." The boy looked at the judge, then at the officer standing nearby, the same officer who had smashed his face into the cruiser hood while calling him a little thug. That word still echoed in his ears. Finally, he spoke. "I didn't do anything," he said softly. The judge rolled his eyes. "Of course you didn't. None of you ever do." The boy's fists clenched. The fear that had followed him into this room started to boil into something else, something sharper. "You think this is just a misunderstanding?" the judge barked. "We've got surveillance footage. Someone in a hoodie that matches your build." "Matches my build?" the boy repeated, his voice calm, but rising just enough. "How many other kids wear hoodies and walk home from school?" "Watch your tone," the judge warned. "You've already made up your mind," he said. "This isn't about justice. You're here to teach me a lesson." The gallery shifted. Murmurs rose like static. The boy's mother wiped her eyes in the back row. "Silence," the judge snapped. "Another word, and I'll hold you in contempt." The boy didn't blink. "You already hold me in contempt." That single sentence froze the room. Even the bailiff stopped moving. The judge leaned back, stunned. "I walk home from school," the boy continued. "I carry a backpack full of books. I go to church. I tutor. I stay out of trouble." But none of that mattered when someone pointed at me. The courtroom listened now. Really listened. No one asked where I was. No one cared what I had to say. You saw my hoodie, my skin, and decided that was enough. The judge leaned forward. "Are you saying this court is unfair?" "I'm saying this system never sees me as innocent. Just as black." Gasps spread through the gallery. The judge shifted, suddenly unsure. "This is about evidence." "Then look at the evidence," the boy said. "Not the skin it comes in." At that moment, a side door creaked open. A clerk walked in with a sealed folder, whispering something into the judge's ear. The judge frowned, took the folder, and opened it. His eyes scanned the new contents. Clear surveillance footage, far clearer than what had been presented earlier. The suspect was taller, bulkier, older. Same brand of hoodie, different person. Different face. The judge looked back at the boy. The boy stood still, dignified. "You have something to say now?" he asked. But he wasn't smug. He didn't smile. He just sat down quietly for the first time in control. His name was Elijah Matthews. He was 17, a student, a brother, a son, a scholar. But on the day he was arrested, none of that mattered. All the world saw was a hoodie and a shade of skin. Elijah grew up in Oakbridge Heights, where keeping your head down was a survival skill. His mother, Loretta, worked double shifts at a hospital, always telling him, "You'll have to be twice as good to be seen as equal." He didn't understand it when he was young. Now he understood too well. The night of his arrest, Elijah had just finished a tutoring session at the library. He was halfway home, headphones in, when he noticed the flashing lights. Then hands were grabbing him. Then the cold slam against a cruiser. No one asked a single question. They told him to stop resisting. But he hadn't moved. He sat in a holding cell overnight. No phone call. No lawyer. Just suspicion. They said he matched the description. Said his silence made him look guilty. The next morning, he was processed like every other number in the system. Loretta found him after 16 hours. He saw the fear in her face. But he couldn't bring himself to cry. Not then. Not in front of her. Not after all her sacrifices. The whispers started at school. Some students believed the rumors. Teachers looked away. Counselors asked vague questions but never pressed for answers. When court day came, Elijah wore the only suit he owned. He sat straight, even as his public defender forgot his name twice in the hallway. Still, he showed up, because that's what his mom raised him to do. The prosecutor built the case on Shadow's blurry footage, a hoodie, location proximity. That was it. No stolen goods. No fingerprints. No motive. But he said it with such confidence, it almost didn't matter. Then came the moment Elijah would never forget. The prosecutor said, "He fits the profile. He's from Oakbridge. His kind rarely have alibis that hold up." Those words landed like gunshots. Elijah scanned the jury. Most looked away. The judge stayed stone-faced. Not even a raised brow. During recess, two officers joked in the hallway, loud enough for Elijah to hear. "Thinks a suit makes him innocent," one said. "Probably rehearsed in the mirror," the other laughed. He said nothing, because reacting would only prove their point. Back inside, the prosecutor described Elijah as urban, at risk, a likely loiterer. They painted a caricature, not a case. And no one stopped them. His mother took the stand, told them about his honor classes, his volunteer work. The judge barely looked up. Then Mr. Ramos, his English teacher, testified, said Elijah was trustworthy, brilliant, that he'd let him babysit his own children. The prosecutor waved it away. "Character means little under pressure," he said. When the surveillance was shown, it was blurry. The prosecutor froze the screen. "That's your client," he declared. Elijah finally spoke. "That's not me. I was at the library. Ask the librarian." They never called the librarian. The judge said, "Let your lawyers speak." But Elijah was done being quiet. "They've already decided who I am," he told his lawyer. His lawyer looked tired. "Let's prove them wrong." That moment came quicker than anyone expected. When the updated footage arrived, it was undeniable. The real suspect was someone else. Then Elijah stood again. "You wanted to remind me of my place," he said to the judge. "Let me remind you of yours. You're here to serve justice, not prejudice." A pause hung in the air. Then, from the back of the courtroom, the doors opened again. A tall man in a suit walked in, broad-shouldered, calm, confident. Elijah smiled. "Hey, big bro." It was Assistant U.S. Attorney Xavier Matthews. He walked straight to the bench. "Your Honor," he said firmly, "we're filing an ethics complaint with the Judicial Review Board. An investigation into racial bias in this courtroom is now underway." The judge's jaw dropped. "Xavier, we've worked together. You stood beside my father for photo ops," Xavier interrupted. "But when his son stood before you, you saw nothing worth defending." He turned to the prosecutor. "We're reviewing your office for discriminatory practices." The prosecutor's face drained of color. Elijah turned to the judge. "I shouldn't have to tell you my father is Judge Daniel Matthews, or that he mentored you. None of that should matter. The truth should have been enough." He placed his hand on his mother's shoulder. She stood with tears in her eyes. Then Elijah looked around the courtroom. "I'm not here to celebrate," he said. I'm here to make sure this doesn't happen to the next kid who walks in wearing a hoodie and a target on his back." The judge was pale, hands trembling. His gavel, once a symbol of power, now looked like dead weight. "You almost broke me," Elijah said. "But I won't let you. I won't be the exception. I'll be the reason this changes." As he walked out, arm in arm with his mother and brother, the room remained still. A few clapped softly. Others simply watched, understanding for the first time what justice was supposed to look like. Outside, the wind moved gently. Elijah looked up at the sky, the courthouse behind him. He didn't smile. Not yet. This wasn't a happy ending. It was a reckoning. He had been forced to prove his humanity. And now, he would fight to make sure no one else had to. Because dignity isn't given. It's carried. And Elijah Matthews carried his like armor unshakable, unbreakable, undeniable. That night, Elijah sat on the front steps of his home, his elbows resting on his knees, watching the city lights flicker in the distance like tired stars, trying to stay awake. The weight of the courtroom still clung to his shoulders, not because he was still afraid, but because he understood more clearly than ever what it meant to survive in a world built to misjudge him. He wasn't thinking about victory. This wasn't that kind of story. He was thinking about how close he came to becoming another name on a long list of forgotten boys, about how justice was never truly blended, just looked away when it was convenient. Loretta stepped outside, holding 2 mugs of hot cocoa. She sat beside him without a word, handed him one, and took a quiet sip. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. They just listened to the wind move through the leaves, the soft sound of tires on asphalt a few blocks away, the life that kept moving as if nothing had changed. "You all right?" she finally asked. Elijah nodded. "Yeah, just tired." She looked at him for a long time. "You were brilliant in there today." He didn't respond immediately. "It shouldn't take brilliance to be believed, Mom. It should just take the truth." She touched his hand gently. "I know, baby, but the world doesn't always work the way it should. That's why what you did today matters." He nodded again, his throat tight. "I could feel Dad in the room, you know." "I could too," she whispered. He would have been proud. A smile tugged briefly at Elijah's lips. He always said the courtroom is supposed to be where truth rises. Today it finally did. Loretta leaned her head on his shoulder. "And tomorrow, we make sure it keeps rising." The next day brought headlines. Not because Elijah wanted them, but because some stories demand to be heard. Local papers ran features with titles like "Wrongly Accused Teen Sparks Legal Review" and "Justice Delayed, Not Denied." Photos of Elijah walking out of the courthouse, flanked by his mother and brother, went viral. Some called him brave. Others called him lucky. A few, predictably, called it an overreaction. Elijah ignored them all. He didn't need validation from strangers. What mattered to him was the phone call he got from the library that morning, Mrs. Whitaker, the head librarian, crying as she told him she had called every news outlet in the city, demanding they tell the truth. "You've helped my grandchildren, Elijah," she said through tears, "and I'll make sure the world knows it." Or the email from Mr. Ramos, his teacher, letting him know the school had nominated Elijah for a statewide academic leadership award. Or the handwritten note left on their front porch from the older gentleman who had whispered to him outside the courtroom. "You made us proud, son. You made us seen." But even as recognition came, so did backlash. Anonymous messages, sideways stares at the grocery store, whispers from those who didn't want to see their system questioned. Some teachers at school avoided him completely now. One substitute was overheard saying, "He got lucky with a technicality." And so Elijah walked through his days with the quiet strength of someone who had already stood in the fire and come out the other side. He didn't lash out. He didn't retreat. He just kept showing up, eyes forward, shoulders back, unapologetic. A week after the trial, a town hall meeting was held at the Oakbridge Civic Center. People packed the room, some curious, some angry, some afraid. Elijah sat in the front row with his mother and brother as a panel of city officials, judges, prosecutors, and police chiefs took their seats. The moderator stood and welcomed everyone, then turned to Elijah. "Mr. Matthews," she said, "would you like to begin?" Elijah stood slowly. The room hushed. Cameras clicked. All eyes on him. He didn't have a script. He didn't need one. "I'm not here to be your symbol," he said plainly. "I'm here because I was almost destroyed by a system that was supposed to protect me." A ripple moved through the crowd. I was treated like a criminal before I was ever asked a question. I was silenced before I was heard. And if I hadn't had a family with resources, connections, and proof, if I hadn't been able to bring receipts, I'd be in jail right now. He paused, letting that truth sink in. I'm not the exception. I'm the exposed nerve. There are dozens of kids just like me who didn't get their footage reviewed, who didn't have lawyers who cared, who didn't get to walk out of that courtroom. He looked toward the judge who had nearly sentenced him. The man shifted in his seat. "You all keep saying this isn't about race. But it is. Not just about black and white, but about assumptions. About who's allowed to be innocent and who has to fight to prove it." Elijah's voice grew stronger. "I am 17. I should be worried about finals and prom and whether my crush likes me back. But instead, I've had to stand in a courtroom and remind grown men what fairness looks like." Silence. Then applause. Slow at first. Then louder. The town hall lasted hours. Policies were questioned. Commitments were made. Investigations were launched. But for Elijah, the real change wasn't going to be in statements or press releases. It would come from the way people looked at him, now not as a case file, but as a person. In the weeks that followed, he returned to school. Life, as it always does, tried to resume its rhythm. Homework, classes, college applications. But something had shifted inside him. He started a student justice council, partnered with local organizations to host Know Your Rights seminars for teens, applied for internships at civil rights law firms. And every day, he still walked his sister to school, waved to his neighbors, helped carry groceries for Mrs. Baker 2 doors down. Because justice, he'd learned, wasn't just won in courtrooms. It was protected in communities. One afternoon, as he walked into the rec center to volunteer, a little boy ran up to him. "Hey," the boy said, "you're the guy from the news. My mom said you're like a hero or something." Elijah crouched down. "Nah, I'm just someone who didn't let the world lie about me." The boy blinked. "Can I be like you?" Elijah smiled. "Don't be like me. Be better." That night, Elijah sat at his desk, pen in hand, writing his college admissions essay. The prompt was, describe a moment that shaped who you are today. He paused. Then he began. "They told me to stay quiet. That if I was polite enough, still enough, agreeable enough, things would work out. But I've learned silence doesn't protect you when people are determined to see you as less. I'm applying to your school not just to learn law, but to change it, because I know what it's like to be misjudged. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure no one else has to carry that same burden in silence." When he finished, he folded the paper carefully and slid it into an envelope. Tomorrow, he'd mail it off to Columbia University. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. The world had tried to shrink him. But Elijah Matthews refused to fit inside anyone's box ever again. He had stood in the fire, and he walked out stronger. Because sometimes the most powerful revolution starts with one quiet voice saying, "I am not who you think I am," and daring the world to listen.